Hey, good Monday to you. It's September 14th. Wanted to give you an update on where Sally's going, although I'm sure you're getting a lot of headlines if you're even interested in tropical weather. Obviously, this is one of those where, yeah, it makes big headlines, not just across the U.S., but especially across the Gulf of Mexico. Anytime a tropical storm or hurricane is in the Gulf of Mexico, it's always going to make headlines. As expected, it passed over Florida as well, it's kind of hard to explain. It's not really a wave that passed over Florida. It would have been a wave, but it was kind of developing as it was passing Florida. So it really didn't change our weather in Florida a whole lot over the weekend. The main thing that it changed was there were some wind gusts out over the Gulf and at area beaches. The surf was rough, and obviously the boating conditions went downhill. Those are all things that we talked about last Thursday and Friday. And I talked about those in my evening newscast when I said, hey, it's not really going to change our weather over land, but out over the open waters, it will. So anyway, so Sally kind of got organized as it was passing Florida, west of Tampa Bay, especially yesterday. You could kind of tell it was trying to get organized. Today, as you can see, it's a lot more organized. And this was actually forecast. So you can't really knock any meteorologist or the National Hurricane Center. I know it's kind of become cool over the years to knock the National Hurricane Center. And admittedly, they don't always make perfect decisions. But in this case, hey, folks, this was predicted and this was expected. Center of circulation is right about in here. So if you're thinking it's back in here, it's not. Hurricane Hunter aircraft flew there, right through there, and the center is right about in there. That being said, it has been wobbling a bit, which is also very, very normal. So you can't just draw a straight line and say it's going to do like that. No. Instead, what's been happening is it's been kind of trying to reform its center. And that's what newly developed or developing tropical storms going into hurricanes do. They tend to bounce around. Sometimes you'll even see them like backwards or retrograde into a better environment. There has been wind shear that's been really strong up against the storm the past couple of days, and that is now backing off. That was also predicted and expected, which is why we said, hey, the good news is on Friday and Saturday it wasn't really strengthening, and even yesterday. And then all of a sudden today you could tell that wind shear backed off. How you can tell is by looking at the outflow clouds in the upper levels of the atmosphere. See how these clouds really start to spread out? Okay, over the weekend that wasn't the case. Instead, what you saw was all the rain on the eastern side and almost no cloud cover on the western side. Well, that's starting to change. So the center is becoming more organized, which is bad news, but again, it was predicted. So nobody along the Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida coast should be surprised if they've been watching the forecast the past few days. This is going to continue drifting west-northwest. However, at some point in time, it's going to make a northerly turn. Now, will that happen near Mobile? Will it happen near Biloxi? Will it happen closer to New Orleans? At this point in time, it's kind of looking more like Mississippi, Alabama is when it's going to make that northerly turn, but it's also going to slow way down. You can see the center of circulation, how it's really starting to wrap up right in there. Tell you the truth, let me show you a different view. Here you go. So right down here at the bottom of your TV screen, you can kind of get a good idea. Let me put a stop to that. There we go. And let me change my color here. There we go. Okay. The center is right in here. And you might be thinking, now wait a second, I thought the center is where there's no rain. Well, in developing tropical storms into small hurricanes or, category 1 hurricanes, actually a lot of times it is filled with a lot of rain. It's not until it really starts to intensify, strengthen, and organize, like a Cat 2, Cat 3, that all of a sudden you start to see this clear out. So as of right now, yes, where you see that blob of rain is the center. It's full of showers and storms right now, and there's been a lot of lightning wrapping around it, which is also a sign of intensification. Don't be surprised if over the next 12 to 18 hours you do see this start to kind of develop an eye-like feature. That is also very normal as it goes from like just barely Cat 1 to more like upper Cat 1 approaching Cat 2. And yes, I do expect that this probably will approach Cat 2 and maybe even become a Category 2, even though the official forecast hasn't featured that yet. It has been mentioned numerous times in the discussions and by lots of meteorologists that, hey, it's going to be in an environment for about 18 to 24 hours where it has a window of opportunity. Well, we're now in that window. Hurricane Hunter reconnaissance aircraft, both NOAA and the Air Force went in there, and here you can see the center is right about in here, but look at these strong winds. And notice they are on the northeastern side. That's not surprising because, again, all the wind shear was coming from this way, from the southwest. So the strongest part of the storm naturally is going to be on this side, which it normally is anyways, but especially when there's wind shear coming from this direction, your strongest winds are going to be on this side. Now, ultimately, if it really blossoms, which hopefully, and I doubt it will, like to a 3, a Cat 4, once you get to that type, a major hurricane, then yeah, the winds all of a sudden they start to wrap all the way around the center and they're about the same. But in this case, the early stages going from tropical storm to Cat 1, this is very normal to see the strongest winds on the northeastern side. All right, all that being said, there's your latest forecast track. Do not be surprised if this continues to wobble around. What a lot of people get caught up on, and actually at my particular station, we do not do this. We don't even show this center line anymore. We do not like showing that center line because our firm belief is the forecast is this area. You see that? All the way from New Orleans to Pensacola. That cone is the forecast area. So the reason why my station and why as meteorologists in Florida we're not always big fans of that center line is because it gives a perception that we're going to be exactly accurate. Well, in 2004 with Charlie, as many people found in Florida, that's just not the case. There's a reason why we show this forecast cone, which, believe it or not, is actually an error cone. That's really what it is. But it's because the center could end up being here. It could be here. It could be here. It could be here. It could be all over in there. So don't concentrate on that center line. Instead, just know that Pensacola, Mobile, Biloxi, Gulfport, New Orleans, that entire area. Now, if you were to split the difference and basically take it down the center, you would essentially go somewhere between Biloxi and Mobile probably. And I'll be honest with you in that the best computer model guidance this season, GFS American, a lot of people have dogged it out for years, but it has been by far the best this year, crushing the euro in so many instances. It yet again, I personally think, is crushing the euro. Now, the euro might ultimately end up being right. The European brings it way out here. So that would obviously be a bigger threat to New Orleans. But watch what the GFS, and this is the latest model run, by the way, and that's why I'm doing my video a little bit later today. I really wanted to get all this data in. Look what it does. First of all, it strengthens. You see this banding feature right here that starts to wrap around right there all the way to the western side. Okay, that's a strengthening hurricane. So that's why I said don't be surprised if this goes from Category 1 to barely a Category 2. All it's got to do is get up to that like 111, 112 mile per hour threshold, and boom, it'll get declared a Category 2. And so that's easily possible. And then notice what it starts to do by tomorrow morning. It slows way down, and all of a sudden it finally drifts to the north. So that being said, the controlling factors are big high pressure to its north, which is why it's kept it on a westerly path. That high pressure gets out of the way. Cold front will be sweeping in from the upper Midwest across the country. That will finally allow kind of a lift, a vacuum. I've talked a lot about that over the years. And when that vacuum takes place, for all you Florida folks that remember Irma, we kept saying it's going to turn north. It's going to turn north. And a lot of people didn't believe us, but it finally turned north. It's kind of like that. It's not the same situation, but it's kind of like that. We know it's going to go north. It's just a matter of when. So will it be when it gets to here and then go whoop? Will it be when it gets to here and then go whoop? Will it be when it gets to here and then go whoop? It's just a matter of when, all right? And the problem with these forecasts, just like with Irma and like so many others, we've gotten really good at track forecasting. Not so great at intensity, but really good at track forecasting the past 20 years. But you got to remember that that line of when it turns is such a small error, because if it decides to turn here, all of a sudden these areas out here don't even matter. It's like, oh, okay, well, it's staying to our east, right? That's the problem with it's almost like a human psychological problem. You know what I mean? It's more of a psychological issue than it is a meteorological issue, because we can keep saying, hey, you have to watch this entire area. But there's something about when the human brain looks at something and says, oh, I see a center line, so I don't have to worry about it if I'm west of it. No, if I lived anywhere between New Orleans and Pensacola, I'd be watching this very carefully. All right, here's the other thing too. Everybody always likes to talk about wind. There's also storm surge factor. This is a big storm surge problem area. Meteorologists have known about this for 100 years. This is not a surprise. We've talked about it for New Orleans. We warned New Orleans way before Katrina, like, you are overdue for a big storm to hit. And it's Biloxi, it's Gulfport, it's Mobile. All these areas are very prone to storm surge coming right over land. Just low-lying areas, okay? So that's going to be a big problem they have to worry about. And you might be thinking, yeah, but if it's only a category 1 or 2, is it a big deal? It is, because of orographic effects. In other words, it's not as much about really strong winds like Cat 3 or 4. It's more about this thing's been chugging along for days, and guess what it's been doing? It's been piling water, pushing water right up against this coastline. It can't go anywhere. So what happens is, all right along this area, it just keeps piling up and piling up and piling up. So already water levels are rising naturally because, again, a kind of an orographic effect. We talk about this in the Big Bend of Florida, actually, how it works that way between like east of Panama City towards Cedar Key and Tampa Bay. There's just that little notch, and because water gets shoved up in there, it can't go anywhere. It can't go out. So it gets shoved in there, and even if it's only a tropical storm or Cat 1, you tend to get bigger storm surges. Okay, so that's number 2. Number 3, heavy rain. Let me show you the precipitation output. Storm total rainfall, okay, so if you start with right now, obviously the heaviest of rains have been offshore. That's good. Watch what starts to happen though. It expands towards the coastline, and all of a sudden you start to see these numbers really adding up by tomorrow night going into Wednesday. This is not out of the question that you could easily see 15 to 20 inch rainfall amounts in this area. I mean, even in the Tampa Bay area where it just rained lightly yesterday, we had like 2 to 4 inch rainfall amounts, okay? So over the weekend, if it rained lightly in Florida, and yet we saw that kind of heavy rain, and by the way, in the Keys, it didn't rain lightly. It rained very heavily where they picked up like a foot of rain. That puts into perspective how it's not always about intensity. It's not always about where's the center going to go. A lot of times it's just about, hey, there's just tons and tons of deep tropical moisture that's going to be funneling northward like this. And at some point in time, it's going to go over land. It's just going to start raining. Okay, that being said, when this center slows way down tomorrow and tomorrow night and then finally starts to make its northerly turn, it's going to rain and rain and rain and rain and rain and rain and rain on the eastern side over land for probably 2 days. And obviously that becomes a problem. So again, it's not about, well, are storms changing compared to what they were just 5 years ago? No. This is what happens when a storm slows down and moves in the path that it moves in. It's a slow moving storm. It's going to be pushing water ashore, and then it's going to make a slow path to the north. Now, eventually, once it gets caught up in the upper level winds, yes, it will take off and go off to the northeast. But by that point in time, the damage has already been done. All right, so that's why when you hear me talk over the years, you know that I don't like hype. And I don't like hype because it's not that I don't want to warn. No. If there's a big storm, I'm going to warn you. I'm going to like jump up and down and be like, watch out. It's more along the lines of I don't like the cry wolf syndrome. If you tell somebody for years and years and years and years and years and you hype, oh, there's another hurricane, it's coming right at us, and it doesn't, eventually those people are going to ignore you. So you have to be very careful with hurricane forecasting. So what we said was wave developing into a tropical storm, gradually intensifying, and it could rapidly intensify today. And sure enough, that's happening. So now the message that has been sent out, already has been said for the past 3 days in a row, was Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Western Florida, you need to take precautions in those areas that this could be very dangerous. Now, if you're inland and away from the wind threat and not in a low-lying flood-prone area, I'm not saying this will be you can't survive this. Of course you can. Like these inland areas, as long as you're out of the flood-prone areas, like most storms. I've said this during Irma. I even said it during like the Wilma years, the Charlie years, Gene, Francis, all those. If you're in a sturdy structure, you will survive, okay? It's not like that. We're not talking a Cat 5 that all of a sudden just bam, and knocks down every house. No, we're talking about flooding problems, storm surge problems, and those rains meeting the storm surge so that there's river problems, low-lying area problems, those types of things, okay? So again, you got to keep everything in perspective. And what it really comes down to is people need to know where they live, what their flood zone is, what their hurricane evacuation zone is. For example, I know that my elevation is about 50 feet where I live. Well, everybody needs to know that kind of stuff. Realtors don't like to tell you that, but you have to do that research so that if you're in a hurricane zone area, what's your evacuation zone? And will you flood even if you're outside of the hurricane evacuation zone? Because flood zones and hurricane evacuation zones, two totally different things. All right, we've covered Sally. There it is. It's headed towards somewhere around that Mississippi, Alabama area, okay? Now, let's talk about the big talk that has been, oh my gosh, there's 5 storms out there all at once. I'll be honest with you, I'm starting to forget everything. It's so crazy. You got Sally, you got Paulette. Paulette did pass over Bermuda as expected. The good news is that little island, listen, those folks out in Bermuda, they know how to build and they know how to survive hurricanes. So you won't see a lot of major problems from them because they are really good at disaster mitigation, which is what our country needs to get better at, quite honestly. It's okay to build in hurricane zones, but you got to build properly. We have to get better at that in the U.S., and Bermuda's done that. So you're not going to see tons of problems out of Bermuda, even though Paulette went right over them. There's what's left of Renee. It'll fall apart in the next couple of days. Doesn't matter. Here you go, Vicky out in here. I don't think it'll even matter. 15 years ago, we probably would have never even seen this the way we do now because we have such amazing satellite technology. There's another wave back in like this area, and then you've got this one right down in here, okay? And this was the one that last week some people online were hyping, saying, well, this is going to be the next big one. No, this is another feature that is going to move like this. So basically, you've got this one moving away from land, this one that doesn't matter, this one that's going to do like this, and then probably just meander around in here and fall apart, and this one that's going to do like this. So none of this matters at all to anybody on land. The only thing that matters right here, Sally. And by the way, this isn't developing, so it doesn't matter either, okay? So going down the road then, let me pull this view out, okay? So now what I'm showing you is the Atlantic-wide view. Here is Africa right there. Here is the U.S. coastline with Florida right in there. Okay. These little bullseyes are moisture bullseyes, essentially. There's Sally and there's Paulette. Okay, there's that one. There's that one. There's the next wave. Okay, so I show this graphic a lot because it really does a good job illustrating. By the way, there's little Renee in there. Okay, so let's go forward in time and let's see what happens. Okay, forward. Okay, to right there. That is this Friday. This is what's left of Sally coming out over off the eastern seaboard. Here, right in there, there's that next storm. Looks like Renee fell apart. So did that other wave, or so did that other storm. Vicky, and this one, this next wave is somewhere right in here. So a lot of people like to always then look down the road. What's the next one? What's the next one? You know, it's always what's next. Well, here's what I think. Even though all eyes, and unfortunately a lot of hype, has always been out here in the main developmental region of, well, what's the next one? It looks like that next wave will try to develop probably by late this week, going into early next week. There it is right there. But what I want you to notice is something that's happening over the U.S. And if you've been watching my videos the past couple of weeks, you will know that this is not a surprise, and I've been harping on this. Might as well put an asterisk right here. As long as the current patterns across North America and the U.S. continue the way they are, which it looks like they do, I am not that concerned out here like so many people that love to hype the Atlantic. I'm not seeing it. Yes, don't get me wrong, I'm not taking my eyes off of it. We do have to watch every single one of these waves, because if one gets into the Caribbean, oh, you betcha it'll be a problem. But I'm not seeing that right now. You know what I'm seeing? The same thing I told you 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, and 1 week ago. This area between the Caribbean and the Gulf. And here's why. The pattern, let me go back and forth on this, okay? This right here is a front, and that's why Sally and its remnants do like this, okay? Now let me go forward. Here is another front by Friday, right there. Well, look at that. It's coming right down into the deep south. So, I mean, there's going to be a lot of places across the deep south, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, the Carolinas, that have the most comfortable first blast of fall cool weather you've seen this season, and it's going to be like, wow, this feels great. We have a rule in Florida. To the tropical meteorology experts in Florida, our rule is be very careful if you get those first big fronts in September coming all the way down like this into Florida or even the Panhandle or the Gulf or the Atlantic. See how that one ends up all the way down there? Because what can ultimately end up happening is something tries to develop on one of those fronts in the Gulf, in the Caribbean, in the Western Atlantic. That's what can happen. And so I am seeing some early signs of maybe something next week trying to do that right in this area. So that's one of the why, oh, and by the way, so this goes out a whole, 2 weeks from now. And look, an even stronger front. This looks like a really, really strong cold front coming into the southeast. So again, you might be thinking, wow, that's great. It might even make it all the way down into central and southern Florida. Like Tampa Bay could see an early season cold front before October even comes. As a meteorologist, I don't get that excited for that. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'd love to see cooler air and a blast of fall-like conditions, but I get nervous because that's the kind of thing that can come all the way down and then it stalls out. In other words, we're not to the time of year yet where these fronts, see right in there, cleanse the atmosphere in the Gulf and the Caribbean. In other words, there's too much pent-up moisture and energy. So going forward, that's the area I'm going to continue to watch very carefully. Gulf, Caribbean, Western Atlantic. Yes, things will develop out here and continue to, meander out here in the main developmental region out in the Atlantic. Yes, they will continue to try and develop. Yes, there will continue to be waves. I'm just not as concerned about that right now because they're all showing signs of kind of doing like this, doing what we call recurvers. They're kind of doing the classic get caught up in the wind flow and the jet stream pattern, and whoop, there they go. And so nobody really cares about them. All right, that being said, there are such things as long-term upper-level patterns, Madden-Julian oscillation, you might hear it called MJO. I'm also seeing us go from the phase that we're currently in, which is very conducive for lots of tropical storms, out of that phase. That might also help us to kind of calm things down as we head towards the tail end, the latter part of the tropical season. It's not a guarantee, but sometimes that helps. All that being said, some of the years where things quiet down at the end of the year, you still have to watch, even all the way into like late October and November, you still have to watch this area. That's kind of what Wilma did. And some of the biggest storms to ever hit the southwestern coast of Florida. That's what they've done. They formed down there in the Caribbean and then whoop, right up into, that's what Michael did, right up into Florida. So anyways, those are the areas I'm still watching. Yes, Sally, unfortunate that it's going where it's going. This is all very normal though for this time of year. Yes, it has been exceptionally busy. But we kind of knew based on the La Nina conditions that it was going to be that time of year. And with the satellite technology we have these days, we're going to pick up on every single storm that's out there. Whereas 25, 30 years ago, we might not have picked up on 60% of these things. So we're doing a lot better job at detection, tracking. I still think we need to do a better job, and we're trying on research into intensity forecasting. But anyways, I'll have more for you later, and I'll throw some graphics up later also if I see some changes in Sally. But yeah, Sally's going to be the big headline in the Gulf Coast region here over the next couple of days. All right, have a great day.